Designer's Cafe.
In the sands of the Sahara stands one of our greatest legacies. The oldest stone structure of its kind in the world. 100 years older than its famous cousin, the Great Pyramid of Giza, the Step Pyramid, is a cornerstone in the history of civilization.
This is the most important pyramid on Earth.
And the first pyramid ever built. But now, ravaged by looters, earthquakes, and the simple erosion of time itself, this ancient skyscraper is falling apart. For 5 years, British and Egyptian experts have been battling to rescue it, putting their lives in danger and their engineering skills to the test.
What happened?
But fate has another trick up her sleeve, one that no one sees coming.
I didn't know what was going to happen. No one knew what was going to happen.
History may have thrown the Step Pyramid of Saqqara one curveball too many. Time is turning this pyramid to dust. Cairo, Africa's largest city, and a cradle of civilization, where ancient history dominates a modern skyline. 30 kilometers to the south of the city, at the ancient burial site of Saqqara, is where its history began. And where it's still in the making. Here, the race is on to save the oldest stone pyramid on Earth.
Stones are falling apart. I made a decision. No one can enter the Step Pyramid because it was so dangerous.
Look at the stones, it's coming down. This part.
Saving the Step Pyramid is the obsession of one very determined archaeologist.
All my life, if I'm proud of something, I'm proud of the restoration of the Step Pyramid.
This isn't just a poor cousin to the great monuments of Giza. It's the mother of all pyramids. Built 4,600 years ago, it's one of the first monumental symbols of pharaonic power and the prototype for all Egypt's pyramids. For millennia, it's been left alone to face the ruin of time. Until 2002, when Dr. HOUZZ is appointed head of the Supreme Council of Antiquities. He's determined something has to be done.
I said, if I did not do the restoration, I will insult myself and I will leave my job right away.
And so began one of the most ambitious restoration projects in Egyptian history. Above ground, the challenge is to repair the badly eroded steps, replacing thousands of stones that have fallen or been stolen over millennia. But the biggest, most dangerous restoration job is inside. Extending 30 meters underground, the secret heart of the pyramid, the king's burial chamber, is collapsing. Huge boulders are falling from the roof, threatening to crush the sarcophagus below. And leading from the chamber, a labyrinth of tunnels, many unsafe, many still unexplored. Fixing this pyramid will be a dangerous undertaking. But one team is ready to take on the job. Based in Wales, UK, Syntec are a company who specialize in fixing broken old buildings.
The idea of the foot of this then would be propped back against the scaffold.
Even for them, this is a first.
If someone said to me 50 years ago, you will actually repair the oldest structure in the world, I'd say, you've got to be joking. You really got to be joking.
The responsibility is massive, but you're coming at this project with a view to trying to solve a problem.
They have a plan to insert stainless steel anchors into the burial chamber roof, stabilizing the structure from the inside out.
What we do is keyhole surgery for buildings.
Once in place, the anchors will be practically invisible, but the plan is controversial. And the Egyptian engineers in charge on site have a problem with it. They're worried the process of inserting the anchors may precipitate further collapse. Dr. Hassan oversees all restoration inside the pyramid, he has personal sign-off on whether or not to install the anchors.
You have to be cautious about the stability of the chamber, burial chamber, and the stability of the burial shaft, and of course, the ceiling.
It's been 5 years since the British engineers first visited the pyramid and began to formulate their plan for fixing it. What they find inside is a nightmare.
The crack travels down and then it shoots across this way.
A natural crack running right through this earthquake-prone structure.
So still recent movement then, Richard.
A 5-kilometre maze of fragile tunnels and cavernous voids.
See when you, Richard? That's collapsed in.
Another shaft down here. Where does that go?
You were just careful not to brush the walls or touch the ceiling, just in case it all come down on top of your head.
And we went down into the lower tunnels, and suddenly the lights went out.
Sweaty would really move. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Right, hold on to something.
We sat in the bottom of these tunnels for 20 minutes, waiting for something to happen. That was quite scary.
Finally, 30 metres below ground, they reach the most precious part of all. A king's burial chamber that's collapsing in on itself, burying everything beneath.
This one of the main support beam.
And when I saw the amount of stones that had fallen from that ceiling, I just couldn't believe it.
Wow.
And then I looked up, and that was even more frightening.
You're then looking 29 metres above your head to the roof of the tomb chamber.
It just looked like it was hanging there. And I just looked at Richard and thought, this is not going to be easy.
So this isn't really very sensible, is it, standing here?
And that's really quite daunting, this thought of how do we do a repair?
Since the 1930s, the burial chamber has not only been closed to the public, but to the experts too.
It is deemed very unsafe, but I'm desperate to go in.
Salima is an archaeologist with an unusual passion.
I've always been interested in dead things, I suppose, but I think it's really fascinating how the ancient Egyptians preserved their dead. And so I made my way into mummification and have never quite left it yet.
When it comes to mummies, Saqqara has plenty.
This whole plateau is honeycombed with tombs that date from 2800 BC all the way to 400 AD. You have tombs not just for human beings, but also for sacred animals and votive animals. So you have bull burials, you have cow burials, you have baboon burials, you have ibises, dogs, cats, as well as hundreds and thousands of human beings from all periods.
4,600 years ago, a great pharaoh built the most impressive tomb of all. Ruler of Egypt in 2650 BC, King Yossa was the second pharaoh of the third dynasty. This king had the power and the means to build big. He appointed an extraordinary man to manage the project. Imhotep, a servant who would become the first known architect in history. Instead of marking the king's grave with the usual mud tombstone called a mastaba, Imhotep built upwards and skywards in stone, creating the first pyramid ever, an ancient stairway to heaven.
The king is buried underneath the pyramid. He takes the step pyramid and climb. Then he can reach the sun god.
Ever since their first visit to the pyramid, the British engineers have been making plans to return to fix it. Dennis wants to drill up to 5 meters into the burial chamber roof to insert the reinforcing stainless steel anchors.
These anchors pin all the blocks that are holding the ceiling up now and transfer that load higher up into the pyramid, preventing collapse.
The Egyptian engineers are still unconvinced. They're worried inserting stainless steel anchors could precipitate a collapse in the roof. To convince the Egyptians, the British come up with a 3-phase plan. First, they stabilize the ceiling, then deep point the loose stones, and finally drill and anchor.
Yeah, if we can we go to the bottom? 4 meters.
But even the first phase is a major challenge. The usual method of using tubular props would exert too much upward pressure on key stones that are holding the ceiling in place. Like a giant game of Kaplunk, disturb the wrong stone in here, and it could all come tumbling down. So Peter has been thinking outside the box. His idea is to temporarily support the ceiling by placing bags full of air underneath.
Because air could spread the load over big areas, I thought, well, it's got to be air.
But these are more than just toy inflatables. They're a patented design. Inside each bag are hundreds of thousands of drop-stitch nylon threads.
When you inflate it with air, it'll fill the void of each layer until it's pulling itself tight, and that's where your strength is, and that's what gives you the final size of your bag.
Not only are the bags rigid, they are also incredibly strong. Each airbag has a 3-ton capacity, and in the event of a collapse, they could hold the calculated weight of the burial chamber roof. A comforting thought when you're working in an unstable structure built in a seismic zone. In October 1992, Egypt was rocked by an earthquake measuring 5.9 on the Richter scale. Saqqara was within a few kilometers of its epicenter. Inside the step pyramid, over 200 tons of rubble came crashing down. If a major earthquake hit again, the effects would be catastrophic. For anyone fixing this pyramid, there is more than just history at stake. At the site of the oldest stone pyramid on Earth, restoration is stepping up a pace. Boulder by boulder, workers are replacing fallen stones. Using industrial machinery would cause too much vibration. They do everything by hand. It turns out the best way is to imitate the ancient builders. In charge is a 73-year-old man who's been a stonecutter since he was 10.
My father had an old stone quarry, and I used to work there helping him out. And when I got older, I decided to leave and go and see the Egyptian antiquities.
Hag Saeed believes the only way to fix this pyramid is to know how it was built. And the secret is in the stones.
In this pyramid here, as you can see, the angle of the stones face upwards. These stones, for example, are laid to make 2 levels. This one here makes a right angle with this one.
Each step of this pyramid was originally built at different angles of inclination. And the cut face of the stones lay inwards, pointing slightly downwards to give extra stability. In building the first pyramid on Earth, the ancients combined a sophisticated architectural plan with primitive tools. Today, Hag Saeed's team are doing the same. But inside the pyramid, it's modern engineering that's going to be put to the test. The plan is to build an immense 28-meter scaffold from the base of the burial chamber to within touching distance of the roof. This will provide the British engineers with a working platform from which to position the airbags and hopefully anchor the ceiling. A scaffold of this size needs a secure base. But at the bottom of the burial chamber is a mound of rubble, beneath which lies the true heart of the pyramid, the sarcophagus that once housed the body of the king. The fateful job of removing the debris falls to the Egyptian engineers.
I mean, generally, the situation wasn't good. How would we clear the stones? How on earth could we attempt it? It was really difficult to imagine how we would get it done.
The British engineers believe the best way would be to hoist the stones upwards and out through the south entrance.
We originally thought that we could lift them from the top and it would have been much quicker.
But the Egyptians worry the tunnel leading into the chamber is too fragile to take the weight. They opt for the long way round. Sorting all the stones by hand, they carry them one by one from the bottom of the burial chamber, along the fragile maze of tunnels, and out through the north entrance. It's a risky and potentially dangerous strategy. Above their heads, boulders hang like giant pinballs, waiting to fall. Among the rubble, they discover amazing artifacts. Intricately carved stones, human remains, and broken tombs of the pharaoh's wives and daughters. Finally, they are poised to uncover the greatest artifact of all. It's been over 70 years since archaeologists last documented the king's sarcophagus. Since then, hundreds of tons of bone-crushing debris has rained down on it, threatening to destroy the precious artifact beneath.
When we began to clean this, every week I go to this Saqqara, I asked what's happened, until one day they called me and they said that the sarcophagus began to be clear.
What's been hidden beneath the rubble is finally revealed. Tomb robbers have long since stolen the royal mummy, but the megalith coffin that contained the king's body still remains. Made up of 32 granite slabs, each weighing 3 to 4 tons. On the top, a giant circular stone, plugging the hole through which they would have lowered the body of the king. And inscribed on the stones, clues as to how it was put together.
Look at what the ancient Egyptian did. This is the word Su, which is the word means south. And that is marks that the ancient Egyptian used to leave from the architect to be as a guide how they can reconstruct the sarcophagus.
Clear instructions would have been essential because these giant stones weren't quarried locally, but shipped to Saqqara 1,000 kilometers along the Nile from Aswan, where the best red granite in Egypt was to be found. This coffin came as a flat pack, ancient Egyptian style. For Salima, who specializes in Egyptian death rituals, seeing images of the newly cleared burial chamber is a revelation.
They're the stars. And the excavators talk about these stars as being part of an original roof. So there was an original ceiling, it was another sort of chamber above the sarcophagus chamber.
This room above, long since destroyed, was the preparation room in which the king's body was blessed before being lowered into the sarcophagus chamber.
This had probably a vaulted roof and you had stars on it. The place where the king was clearly in the afterlife. He'd moved on and he'd become one with the gods and the imperishable stars.
The newly unearthed monument provides invaluable clues in the quest to discover how exactly the king was buried. The greatest clue is the granite plug.
That's what we want to pause, really. Because that's the extraordinary thing. The question is, would this hole be large enough for a mummified body that is very stiff to be brought through without damaging the body?
The size of the plug suggests that not all the sarcophagus was in place when the king's mummy was laid to rest.
Because if one's really wrapped up, if a mummy is covered with layers and layers of linen, you can't just go plop and expect that it would slide down. So there had to be people down in there to sort of receive the body and to maneuver it down through this hole, and then they would have crawled out and maybe pushed the last bit of the sarcophagus sort of top into place, and then you'd put the plug in.
Back on site, there's a problem. Now they've cleared the last pieces of rubble, the engineers confirm everyone's worst fears. The sarcophagus is damaged. without the tightly packed rubble to hold it in place, pieces of the coffin are falling away.
We have to tighten it together, not to have any kind of collapsing.
The engineers move quickly, propping one side with steel, binding the rest together with straps and wood. It's only a temporary measure. The only long-term solution is to fix the ceiling and prevent any further stonefall. And no one is more keen to get on with it than the British engineers.